Yesterday was a challenging day for me, and I think it was for many Americans here and also lots of folks around the world. If you're watching this video months in advance, we just had a big election here in the United States, and the outcome was not what I had hoped. And I think I think this was a really important election for us. We unfortunately now have Donald Trump as our new president. And it's no surprise for those of you who've been following me for a while, my thoughts on Donald Trump. I'm not a fan of him, and I think he's particularly dangerous to our world. But putting that aside, this is not a video about politics and my thoughts on politics. I wanted to record this video because of you. Because if you're watching this, you are a business owner who, like me, is probably trying to figure out how to navigate and how to lead through this period of time. And I know if you're like me, maybe just speak for myself, I've been asking myself a lot of hard questions about what does it mean to be a business owner with a platform right now? What responsibility, if any, do I have to be a steward of that influence? How do I show up and lead through this period of time to bring my values to the table while also balancing the priorities of running a business and the fact that my business exists to make money? How do I bring all those things together into this melting pot and also honor my own humanity through this experience? These are questions that I think so many online business owners around the world are asking right now, particularly folks who have platforms, who have influence, who have audience. And I think there's a real opportunity here for us right now to be able to show up and lead, and not only to create good in the world, but also, and I want to be very careful about this because this is not a marketing ploy. This is not like showing up to get clients, but that actually in bringing the fullness of your values and your humanity to the table, that I think there's actually really an opportunity to build deeper relationships and connections with your audience that may actually really help and serve your business. So I want to talk about those things today. I want to share with you what I've been thinking about, and as I'm very much in process navigating this myself, some of the choices and decisions I've made, what I've learned from other online business owners I admire, watching them show up and seeing how they're leading their platforms. And my hope is that you walk away from this video with some practical tools that you can use to navigate the journey of showing up and serving and leading in your audience so that you can do this in a way that feels authentic for you, and that you'll be better equipped down the line when there are challenging times, because this is not going to be the first moment where there are going to be difficulties where, regardless of what we're heading towards, there are always times in history and times in our lives where things are difficult, where we have global events and things that make an impact on lots and lots of people. And I think it's really important as business owners that we know how to navigate those things, how to lead with integrity, with authenticity, bringing who we are to the table through those periods of time. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. And really the core idea I want to share with you in this video, if there's one thing that you take away from it, what I truly fundamentally believe, my philosophy on marketing, on growing a business, what I try to practice every single day in my life and my business, is that to me, navigating a business through difficult times is all about bringing the fullness of your humanity to the table. Now, for many people, this is like very hard and different, because most of us were taught that the model of running a business is all about basically whitewashing ourselves and our humanity out of business. You look at the way that most large corporations are run, they're completely whitewashed of any sense of, humanity in many cases, or values, or, personality, or it's all about how do we just whitewash out all the things that could potentially turn certain people off And how do we show up in a way that is as broad and palatable and as generic as possible so we can speak to the widest range of people possible and sell our stuff to the widest range of people possible? And so most of us have that model of what it looks like to run a business. Or we spent time in corporate America or working for somebody else, where the idea of sharing your voice and speaking up could potentially get you in a lot of trouble, could have negative consequences for you as an employee. And so I think most of us, myself included, have this sense that it's very difficult during times like these to be human and to be human within the context of our business. It's so much easier to just not say anything, to just be this generic kind of surface level, person, whatever it is that you're doing, to just kind of iron out your own perspective, your own thoughts, and your own beliefs from your business, and to just show up and kind of do business as usual. So really the first thing I want to share with you today, and broadly speaking, like the message of this video, is that it's really important to bring your humanity into your business. And I believe fundamentally that this is not just about doing what's right. Of course, we want to do what's right in times like these. I don't believe that not saying something serves anyone. I believe it's actually part of the problem. And I think we need robust dialogue. We need people showing up, sharing their thoughts, their beliefs, their perspectives. And as leaders, as people with platforms, I think it's really important that we do that, because we have an outsized influence. We have a responsibility, I believe, to show up and to share because of the influence that we have. But that also, that doesn't necessarily, that's not at odds with running a business. That actually by doing that showing up and bringing the fullness of who you are into your business, you will be more successful, paradoxically. People will feel more connected to you. And it's hard to do this because it requires vulnerability. It requires, at least for me, this has been a very challenging last few days for me on a personal level. And it's uncomfortable to show up and even talk about those things. I feel like it's hard for me to do this, even to record this video. Like, I feel like I'm just rambling and stumbling right now. I have an outline, but I'm noticing the layers of judgment in my mind even as I record this video. And the part of me that's like, what are you doing right now? Are you just tanking your business because you're talking about your political beliefs? So we have all these messy things that go on during these periods of time as business owners. And I think it's really important to remember, and the guiding principle that really is behind everything that I teach and do and try to model in my business, is that it's so important to be human and to show people who you are. And sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes that's challenging. Sometimes that requires you being bold and brave and courageous and turning people off in the process. But in doing that, there's a level of freedom because you're not pretending, you're not hiding. There's a level of authenticity. People hear you, they see you, and they get a sense for who you really are. And that I believe that when we look at the future and where we're headed in business, that the days of whitewashing out our humanity and just showing up like, some corporate whitewashed persona and everything that we do, those days are behind us. But that's not the world that we're in anymore. People crave authenticity. They crave realness. They crave you. They don't want to just do business with people who can sell them some surface level thing. They want to do business with people who they feel connected to, who they feel like they share values with. And so these are opportunities for us to really be able to build those connections and relationships with our audience, and also to serve and to do good in the process. So bringing your humanity fully to the table, I think, is what it's really about. Now, on a practical level, how do you actually do this? The first thing is, I think it's really important to just, like, in times when things get crazy, to forget this whole idea of business as usual. You look at businesses out there who just pretend that these things don't exist. One of the things that's become clear to me over the past few days, and look, this is something that's not impacting everyone in the same way. I want to be clear about that too. You might be watching this right now, you're like, I don't even care about the election. This is not relevant to me. And you might be really distraught by it like I am. Or you might be happy. I mean, everyone has a different experience, right? But I think it's really important during these periods of time not to just keep doing business as usual, to acknowledge, number one, what you're feeling and what you're going through. And number two, the reality that your audience, that a large percentage of your audience is probably feeling similarly. You might be watching this right now and you're right there with me. We're in a moment together. Like in history, this is a big period of time. Like this is a big deal, at least to me. And so during times like these, it's like you have two choices. Number one is you just like pretend that doesn't exist and you just keep showing up and keep marketing and keep selling the same way. And in my opinion, the businesses who do this, they come off as tone deaf, because it's like, hold on a second. Like, are you not seeing like the reality of where so many people are right now? Versus actually calling out the elephant in the room. This is something that I teach with sales. It's like when you're on a sales call with someone and there's a thing that you're feeling like in that conversation with someone and it's unspoken, one of the most important things you can do is actually just call that out and say, hey, I'm sensing there's some tension here, or I'm sensing there's this thing that we're not really talking about. To be able to actually have that dialogue builds trust with your people. And the same thing goes for marketing and running a business too. So really important during these times to forget this whole idea of business as usual and to realize that when you're in a place in the world where things are happening, that it's really important that we acknowledge that as business owners and that we don't just whitewash that out of our marketing and out of our communication, out of how we're showing up. Because you miss that opportunity. It's like people don't feel seen in that when you're not hearing them and you're not meeting them in that moment. So forgetting business as usual, I think, is really important. Now from there, in terms of navigating how to show up as a business owner in content and your audience, I think the first and most important thing here is I think it's really important to do your processing in private. So your audience, your content, your emails, this is not the place to dump on your audience. If you've got feelings and emotions around what's happening right now, you're so not alone. And it's, of course, I feel that way too. Yesterday was a really hard day for me and I didn't really work. I just laid in bed all day, journaled and cried. This is the honest truth. I was having a lot of feelings coming up around the election and what it meant. And so I wasn't in a place where I was ready to do a video like this. I am today because I've taken a little bit of time to process through how I was feeling. And I feel like I'm in a place where I can now show up in service and to share and to give and to contribute. But I wasn't there yesterday. And so I think it's really important as business owners who have platforms, and particularly the people I'm speaking to here. And I mean, when I work with people and the work that I do, it's helping people build personal brands. So really who I'm talking to here is, the business owner who has a personal brand, who's creating content, who is showing up in their business in a way where they kind of are like the face of the business. I think it's really important during times like this not to show up when you're in a place where you've got actively, unprocessed emotions that you're working through and you don't entirely know what they mean, and you've got anger and you've got fear and you've got all the things that are coming up, and that's not the time to go create a piece of content. It's the time to go journal. It's the time to go take an afternoon off and go on a hike. It's the time to sit with yourself and process through those things and get to a place where you're more in a place of neutrality. And then you can show up and create from a place that doesn't just dump all of that unprocessed stuff onto your audience, which doesn't serve your audience. So I think it's really important to process in private. There's something a mentor told me once. I like this phrase: share from the scar, not from the wound. And it's a super helpful reminder to share with your audience when you're at a place where you have that sense of you've got some distance from something and you're not actively in it. So that means right now, if you're not ready to talk to your audience about what's going on or about how you're feeling about things, that's fine. You don't need to be the first to the party. You don't even need to share anything. And I want to be clear about that too. Not everybody is going to feel like they want to talk about what's going on in our world right now. And that's okay as well. So there's no obligation for you to talk about any of these things. But for the people who, like me, feel like they do and feel a sense of, I don't even want to use the word responsibility, but a sense of really being called to use their platform to share and to speak about some of the things that are going on, then I think it's really important not to jump to sharing from a place where you're not yet ready to share. So sharing from the scar, not from the wound, processing in private, that's super important. And the third thing I think when you're sharing is you want to be really clear about like what your intentions actually are. So whenever I show up and write an email, I try to check in with myself, and I don't get this right all the time. There have been times that I've shared things that I look back on and I'm like, I would have done that differently had I thought more and had I taken a moment and really like connected to myself before I wrote that email and asked myself like, why am I sharing this? And I think it's really important to check in and to clarify like, what is your intention behind actually sharing? Are you sharing because you have some unprocessed emotion that you're really looking like for your audience to comfort you or save you from? If so, we don't want to do that to our audience. Are you sharing because you want to serve your audience? I mean, I think it's really important that as leaders, our content is rooted in service. The reason I'm showing up and recording this video right now is not primarily about me and my thoughts around the election. It's because I have something important to share with you and something that I believe hopefully will help you as a business owner. So I think it's really important, like when we are showing up in content, that you have a moment where you're able to check in with your own intentions. And I think the best intention around creation in a business is service. So when you're creating a piece of content, you can talk about your own experience. And I think when you're sharing, like when I talk about how challenging the last few days have been for me, I'm not doing it out of a place of like being self-indulgent. I'm doing it because, number one, because I think that creates an opportunity for you, if you're also feeling that way, to feel more seen and heard and understood in that. We can both be in that together. We can acknowledge, hey, like we're, as human beings, we're going through this together right now. And that creates a bit of an opportunity in a shared safe space for us to actually have this conversation. And me not bringing that to the table it would fall flat if I just showed up to this video here, or this episode here, and I was just like, here's 5 tips for, leading your audience through difficult times, but I didn't actually bring myself into it at all. So there's a way in which, when you're sharing your own personal story, it's still within the context and the lens of how does that actually serve the other person? And I think knowing what your intention is when you do show up and you do share is really important. Not sharing from a place where you're actively processing emotions, where you're looking for your audience to save you, where, you've got things that you're just dumping on your audience, but really sharing from that intention of service. I'm here because I want to show up and make an impact. There was a colleague of mine, her name's Kim Arjit Singer, who I watched a live of hers yesterday, and I was really inspired. It's one of the reasons why I'm recording this video here, because she was, so she showed up on her Instagram profile and did a live about how to navigate these times with your clients. And she had a lot of really helpful, valuable advice about how to show up with your clients. And if you're processing things right now, how to deal with that. And also some marketing advice taken from the election. So it was a valuable piece of content that also integrated her own humanity in the process. And I really respect that. And I saw that as like, wow, this is a great example of what leadership looks like during this period of time. Here's someone who is showing and modeling her own vulnerability, but also the intention for that piece of content is not just to show up and say, oh my God, I'm having a hard time, but here's some lessons or here's some valuable information that you, my audience, can ultimately take away from this that's going to make your business better, that's going to help you navigate this time more skillfully. And so that is, I think, really important to really ground into like, what is your intention when you share? And that brings us to number 4. I got 5 points on this list. This is like a five steps to navigate the election and not go crazy. So we got number 4 here, and I think this is kind of at the core of so much of what business owners struggle with during periods like this, which is this fear around being polarizing. I'll just, speak from my own experience. I don't struggle with this as much as I used to. But the first time I sent out an email talking about my thoughts on Donald Trump, 500 people unsubscribed from my email list. And it's easy to look at that and say, oh my God, did I just like light my business on fire? Like those are all people that could have potentially worked with me. And when you look at it that way, it's easy to feel afraid about sharing your thoughts and perspectives and your views and parts of yourself that you're afraid that if you talk about them, then they're going to turn people off. And I have that part of me too. Even right now, as I've been talking about the election the last few days, I'm cognizant of the fact that there are people, and I've gotten plenty of emails from people in my audience saying that they're upset or that they want to unsubscribe or that they were thinking about working with me, but then they saw this and then they decided they didn't want to. So there is a reality to the fact that when you share things that are polarizing, when I talk about my views on Donald Trump and how I feel about the election, there's certain people that are not going to like that. Here's the interesting thing that I learned though, the first time I sent an email about my thoughts on Donald Trump, a ton of people unsubscribed. And I also got a ton of people who wrote me back and said, Jason, thank you so much for your bravery. I really appreciate you sharing this. I need to work with you now. And I want to be very careful about how I frame this too, because as I'm talking about this, there's a way that this might be perceived or received as, are you just doing this to get more clients, Jason? Sometimes I talk about polarization as a marketing strategy. And I think it's important to remember this as business owners. The way that you become truly magnetic and attractive to your perfect people is by bringing all of the parts of yourself fully into your business, into your marketing, so that certain people are turned off, but other people have all these opportunities to connect with you in a deeper way. I am not doing this in this moment as a marketing strategy. I want to be clear about this, but I think we can zoom out and we can look at it because so many people are afraid of being polarizing because they're afraid that it's going to impact their business in a negative way. And we see this all over the world right now. You see major leaders. Jeff Bezos is a perfect example of this, who owns the Washington Post, who basically squashed the Washington Post from actually putting out an endorsement for any candidate. And my view is he's probably worried about what was going to happen with Amazon if the president who he didn't endorse was elected. I see this as cowardice. I'll be honest. First of all, I don't think we should have Jeff Bezos running, or owning major media platforms or any, billionaires or company owners. I don't think our media should be in the hands of those people. That's a completely separate conversation. But setting that piece aside, we look at, that, and that's a decision rooted in fear. And I can appreciate and understand why someone would make that decision because I see it in myself. I see the part of me that's afraid to have this conversation with you right now because I'm afraid of the fact that certain people are going to see this and go, Jason doesn't like Trump. Like, screw this guy. I'm never going to work with him now. But this has been something that in my own experience, I've had to really reframe my own belief and my own perspective around this. And what I've found more and more as I've shown up and been vulnerable and said the thing that I'm afraid to say, and so much of what I teach around marketing today is about this because, number one, because I think it's the right thing to do, because there are times when I think it's really important as leaders that we speak our truth, but also because doing that is not incompatible with running and growing a thriving, profitable business. That actually the path to attracting more of the clients that you want and growing your business is by bringing the fullness of who you are to the table. And this is a massive shift of perspective, I think, for most business owners. And when you realize that you're not doing yourself any favors by not speaking up, and that every single one of these opportunities, these moments, is an opportunity to not just do the right thing, but also to develop and deepen the connections and relationships that you have with people in your audience, to show people more of who you are, to create more and more of those touch points and connections where people can feel more like they relate to you, more like, oh, this is someone that shares values with me, someone who shares beliefs that I have, someone who I don't just look at now as a generic business coach, but someone who has this depth of perspective that now there's this alignment that goes deeper than just the fact that this person can help me with their business or my business. This is when you are able to truly stand out as a business owner. So don't be afraid to be polarizing. And I want to be very clear about this because this message could be misconstrued as show up and talk about the election because it's going to get you clients. And that's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is that if you have a fear that doing so is going to compromise your business, in many cases, what I found is the opposite is actually true. That the more that you're able to show up and share and talk about some of these things that you're afraid to talk about, the more that you become a lighthouse to your people, to the people who are truly meant to work with you. And I believe that this is where we are headed as a world, as business owners, that the future of business is not faceless, generic, whitewashed corporations that have no personality, that have no outwardly expressed values, that are just palatable to the broadest swath of people. But rather, we have businesses that are driven by values that are polarizing, but that allow those businesses to become truly magnetic to the right people. I often use Patagonia as an example of this. I've got like 2 Patagonia jackets, and I love Patagonia as a company because of what they stand for and because of their mission to combat climate change through their business. And you walk into a Patagonia store and that is like everywhere. You can't ignore that. Now, some business owners would be terrified to bring that into their business because there's a lot of people out there that don't even believe climate change exists, which is still kind of crazy to me at this point in our world that we're still having that conversation. But that's another completely separate point. But setting that aside, I'm inspired by Patagonia because what I see is a business that has truly owned their values. And Patagonia is a wildly successful business. I mean, they're really profitable and they've continued to grow year after year after year. And I would argue it's because people don't want to just do business today with people who they can go out to a store and buy a jacket. They want to do business with companies that share their values. So we have an opportunity in this moment as business owners to be able to show people what our values actually are. And I think that's really important. And then finally, this brings us to the last point, which is when you are talking about your views and perspectives and your beliefs in your marketing, how do you do it in a way that doesn't just come across as self-indulgent? Well, I think it's really important to ask yourself, what is the lesson? The lesson is the jump into leadership in a piece of content. And so oftentimes when I talk about storytelling and sharing yourself in marketing, what I'll tell people is like, if you just share a story about yourself and that's where it ends, there's no leadership in that. You might build a little bit of a connection or relationship with someone in your audience, but the jump into leadership in a piece of content is being able to share a story to be able to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this right now. This has been a hard few days for me, and here's how I'm working with this myself. Or here's the takeaway that you can take into how you navigate the next few days to make it easier. Or here's what I've learned. Or in this case, in this piece of content, it's here's how I'm leading my audience through this period of time, and here's how you can too. So when I sent an email out yesterday about my thoughts on the election result, I started off the email by talking about how shocked I was and how I'm still really processing what's going on. But I ended the email talking about how as human beings, we're so much more alike than we are different. And that in times like this, it's so easy to look at our neighbors and to see separation, to see how different we are. But actually underneath all that, we all want the same things, regardless of how you voted. I believe there's so much more unifying us than is separating us. And so there was a lesson in that piece of content and a call to unity at the end of that piece of content. It wasn't just like, man, I'm having a really hard time today. There was something more to it that elevated that piece of content into leadership. And as leaders, because as business owners, we are leaders. I want to be clear about that. If you have an audience, your audience, I believe, does not just exist to sell you some or to make sales for you, to buy your stuff. I don't subscribe to that narrow view of business. I think that, of course, as business owners, we are here to make money, but my God, if that's the lowest, that's the bar's so low. Can we raise the bar? Can we rise to a vision of entrepreneurship that is bigger than making money alone? Can we acknowledge that as entrepreneurs, we have a responsibility to serve, to impact, that we have a voice, that we have influence, and that influence transcends the goal of just how do we just sell more stuff? I believe we're here for so much more. And bringing this back to my point, the fifth point of this episode, is I think when you are sharing your own story, it's really important to make that shift at that end of the piece of content into what is the lesson, what is the takeaway, how can you frame something in service to your audience? That's when it becomes not just a self-indulgent thing, but something that allows you to give and to serve through every piece of content that you create, even when it's focused on you. And let me be clear about this, talking about your own story and your own feelings and how you're moving through a specific challenge or period is not selfish. It's not self-indulgent. It allows other people to feel more connected to you, but I think it's really important to also make that shift into leadership, that takeaway, that lesson, that how can somebody use this and alchemize this into something that's going to be valuable for their own life. So number one, forgetting business as usual, I think is really important right now. Let's just not pretend that, things aren't crazy. Let's acknowledge that. Let's process in private so we're not dumping all of our stuff onto our audience. Let's get clear on if you are going to share something, why you're sharing it. Make sure that that intention is rooted in service. Don't be afraid to polarize. Tell people how you feel. Tell people your beliefs. This is not a marketing ploy, but that doing so creates that opportunity for deeper connections and relationships that paradoxically in the long run is actually, I find, one of the best ways to grow your business. And number 5, asking yourself, what's the lesson? How can I show up in true service to my audience through this period of time? Which is giving, which is allowing them through my own experience to learn and to grow and to help make whatever their challenges are or their journey is easier. So I do not have all the answers. I'll be the first to admit that this is a journey of discovery for me too. This is what I've seen in my own business. And as I lead myself through this period of time and my audience through this time, this has been what's most effective for me. But I would love to have this be a conversation between us. And I'd love to learn more about what you're doing in your business right now and what's been working for you. So if you are watching on YouTube, comment down below and let me know, how are you leading your audience through this time? How have you been showing up? What have you found that's been most helpful for you? I would love to hear it down below. And I am sending you so much love through this period. We're going to get through it. It's going to be okay. I believe, every experience in life is an opportunity for learning and growth. And that in that way, all experiences, even the ones that don't meet our expectations, serve. So I'm excited to continue to serve you through this period, to continue to show up, to continue to walk through this together. And I will see you in the next episode.